Hi, it's Mr. Bennett. In this video, what we need to talk about is we're going to talk about the digestive system, how your body breaks down food. So mouth, stomach, intestines, all that fun stuff. So what's the function of the digestive system? As mentioned in your last video, the function of the digestive system is to help maintain homeostasis. The function of every organ system in your body is to maintain homeostasis. Now in this video, what we're going to talk about is specifically how the digestive system helps maintain homeostasis. So to break its job down a little bit further, what the digestive system does is its job is to break food down. Basically what the job of the digestive system is to take this and turn it into this. The job of the digestive system is to take the food that you eat and break it down into carbohydrates, amino acids, nucleic acids, and lipids. That's the job of the digestive system. Now, how does breaking food down to these four macromolecules promote homeostasis? Well, carbohydrates, as we've talked about, are used for energy. And without energy that comes from carbohydrates, you can't beat your heart, you can't produce heat, and you can't do all sorts of things that keeps things the same inside of your body. The amino acids, the nucleic acids, and the lipids, for the most part, that we get from our food are going to be used to make new cells. You have millions of cells dying in your body every day. You have thousands of cells that are dying every second. These cells have to be replaced, and they're going to be replaced using mitosis. Well, during mitosis, one cell is going to be used to make two. How do we make two cells? Well, we take the amino acids, the nucleic acids, and the lipids from the food that we eat. Those are the basic building blocks we need to make new cells. So we take these things from our food and we use them to make new cells. So that's how the digestive system contributes to homeostasis. It's a source of energy. We extract energy from the food that we eat so we can do the chemical reactions and so forth we need to stay alive. And then we also use the macromolecules from the food that we eat to make new cells. So now that we've talked about the basic job of the digestive system, now it's time to start talking about the components of the digestive system, or all the pieces or all the organs that are put together to make the digestive system. Now we break this up into two groups. The main parts of the digestive system is we got the mouth, the esophagus, the stomach, and the small and large intestine. Okay, so obviously we got the mouth here, here's the esophagus, there's the stomach, and then there's your intestines down there. Now the reason why we call these the main parts of the digestive system is these are the parts that food actually travels through. And when you take a bite, that bite of food is going to go through your mouth, down your esophagus, into your stomach, and then it's going to go through your small intestines and then through your large intestine and out. So that's why these are considered to be the main parts of the digestive system. Now, these parts of the digestive system can't do their job all by themselves. They need some help. And so that's where we talk about the accessory structures of the digestive system. These are pieces of the digestive system that food does not travel through, but these parts of the digestive system, and we're talking about the salivary glands, we're talking about the liver, and then we're going to talk about the pancreas. These guys make enzymes and other substances that help in the digestion of food. So these are the main parts of the digestive system that we're going to go through, and you're going to be expected to know the function of each of these parts. Okay, so let's talk about all the parts of the digestive system. We're going to start out by charting the path of food through the body. So we're going to start out by talking about the main parts of the digestive system. So when food travels through your body, the first part of your body that it travels through is the mouth. The mouth is obviously the first part that food travels through. Now, the mouth may seem like a real simple idea, but it actually has some very important jobs to it. First off, the process of digestion begins in the mouth. As soon as food enters your mouth, you're starting to break it down. You're going to break it down both mechanically and you're going to break it down chemically, and the mouth is one of the organs that actually does both of these. So what's the difference between mechanical and chemical digestion? Well, let's talk about that. Mechanical digestion is physically grinding the food apart. We're grinding or we're tearing the food apart into smaller pieces. Okay? This picture we got down here, we got a wolf and he's eating himself a deer. Now that deer was too big for him to eat in one bite, so in order to eat it, he had to break it apart into smaller pieces. That's where the teeth come into play. And so mechanical digestion is when you're breaking the food down into smaller pieces. Now the reason why we want to do this is obviously so we can swallow it. You can't swallow a whole pizza in one bite, and so you need to take and break it down into smaller pieces so that you can swallow it. And then the other thing, by grinding that food up and turning it into smaller pieces, that's going to make the enzymes that your body uses to digest your food work all the much better. So mechanical digestion obviously starts in the mouth, but chemical digestion also starts in the mouth too. Chemical digestion is going to mainly use enzymes, and enzymes are going to break apart the molecules in the food into much smaller molecules. So we're going to take big carbohydrates and break them down into glucose. We're going to take proteins and break them down into amino acids. We're going to take lipids and break them down into fatty acids. That's what enzymes do, and this is chemical digestion. Okay, so mechanical digestion, we're just breaking it up into smaller pieces. In chemical digestion, we're actually breaking apart covalent bonds and turning molecules into other molecules. And an example of chemical digestion that happens in your mouth is the enzyme amylase. We talked about this when I handed out the saltine crackers that one day in class. Amylase is an enzyme that breaks apart starch, and examples of starch are going to be like flours and big sugars, and it breaks it apart into glucose. So the process of breaking apart a carbohydrate actually starts in your mouth. Now, where does this amylase come from? This comes from your spit. Your spit actually has digestive enzymes in it that in your mouth are going to start the process of chemical digestion. So after you've chewed your food up in your mouth and you swallow it, the next place where your food is going to go is it's going to go to the esophagus. And all the esophagus is it's a simple tube that connects your stomach with your mouth. That's it. But it actually isn't just a tube, because here's the thing. Food does not just fall from your mouth down to your stomach. Your esophagus actually pushes it there, and that's the main function of the esophagus, is it's going to push the food or the water to the stomach. It doesn't just fall by gravity, your body actually pushes it down. Now, how the esophagus does this is through a process that we call peristalsis. And what peristalsis is the esophagus has a lot of muscle in it. And when you swallow, what happens is the muscles in your esophagus are going to contract and they're going to push that food down. So here we have some food that someone swallowed here, and you can see that the muscles have contracted all the way around it. And as these muscles contract, they're going to push the food down to where it's going to go into the stomach. A good way to think about it, this is almost like pushing toothpaste out of a tube. That by contracting the muscles above and beneath the food that we swallowed, we can push it down into the stomach. Now, there's a couple of reasons why this is important. First off, if you look at, this is a picture of one of the sugar gliders. I used to have sugar gliders. I don't have any more. These guys could drink standing on their heads. Now, if food or water just fell into the stomach by gravity, this could never happen. But what this sugar glider is doing is he's drinking, and peristalsis, the muscles inside of his esophagus, are forcing that water up into his stomach. You can actually do the same thing. You can be standing on your head and swallow water because the muscles in your esophagus are going to push that water or that food into your stomach. Now, you can actually feel this if you happen to swallow something that's a little too big. If you like eating a steak and you didn't chew it up well enough and you swallowed too big of a bite, if you've ever had that sensation where it just feels like it hurts all the way going down your back, that's because you swallowed too big of a bite and you've stretched out this esophagus. And it actually hurts like crazy. So, anyways, that's the esophagus for you. Its main job is just to push food and water into the stomach. After food leaves the esophagus, we just said the whole purpose of the esophagus is to push food into the stomach. And that's going to be the next step of food as we digest it. So when food leaves the esophagus, it goes into the stomach. Now, the stomach actually has several functions. First function that we got going on is the stomach is actually involved in the chemical digestion of food. That in the stomach, once food gets into the stomach, we're going to add hydrochloric acid to it and then an enzyme called pepsin. Now, what's going to happen as a result of that is, if you remember back when we did the protein extraction lab with milk, that we added some vinegar to milk and we were able to get the protein out of it, the exact same thing happens to proteins in your stomach, that when they get exposed to the hydrochloric acid, that's going to make them form up into a solid ball that can be digested. Also, the enzyme pepsin is going to be used to help start break those proteins down into individual amino acids. So the stomach definitely is involved in chemical digestion, breaking ionic bonds and covalent bonds apart in the food to put them into smaller and smaller molecules. The stomach is also involved in mechanical digestion, that the stomach has often been called a blender. It's called a biological blender. That what happens is when food gets inside the stomach has lots of muscles. And if you want proof of how muscular your stomach is, every time you throw up, what causes the throw up to happen is all the muscles in your stomach contract just all at the same time. And that forces all the food out of your stomach. It's kind of like squeezing one end of a water balloon and the water goes out the other end. That's what happens with your stomach. And the force that the vomit comes out of your mouth, that's entirely from your stomach contracting all at the same time. So anyone who's had the nasty experience of throwing up with your mouth closed and it comes out your nose and all that fun stuff, all that force is a result of the muscles in your stomach. So it's used to throw up, but the reason why those muscles are there is to grind the food up. This is what the surface of your stomach looks like. It's really, really, really rough ridges, and these ridges are called rugae. And these rugae, what happens is when the stomach squeezes, they're going to rub up against each other. And as they rub up against each other, that's going to grind the food into smaller pieces. And of course, grinding food into smaller pieces, that is mechanical digestion. So when the food is in the stomach really works like a blender, and it's going to grind that food up until really when it's done, it's kind of a wet paste that comes out. And the wet paste that comes out of the stomach is called chyme. That's an important term that you need to remember for later. Other functions of the stomach: kills bacteria, fungus, and viruses on your food. Whenever you eat some food, there's some bacteria on it, and there's some fungus, and there's some viruses on it, and these things would love to give you sick. Most of them die when they get exposed to the hydrochloric acid in the stomach. So the microbes that are on your food, they die in the stomach, and that helps keep you safe. Now, the exception to that rule are microbes like E. coli and Salmonella that cause food poisoning. These guys can actually survive the hydrochloric acid and go on and cause major problems. And then the final function of the stomach that we're going to talk about is storage of food. Food stays in the stomach for anywhere for 3 to 4 hours, and then it is slowly let out. So when you ate breakfast, all that food gets stored in your stomach, and then it is slowly let out of the stomach into the small intestine, little at a time. So what this allows us to do is to eat 3 times a day. If we didn't have a stomach, you would have to eat a small amount every 10 to 15 minutes. Now, we're not talking a big meal every 10 to 15 minutes. We're talking like a cracker every 10 to 15 minutes, all day, every day, including while you're sleeping, or else you'd starve to death. And so that's an important function of the stomach, is to store food so we don't have to eat as often. The next organ in the digestive system, or the next thing that your food passes through, is probably the most important. This is the small intestine. Now, the whole purpose of eating food is so that it can be digested, broken into small pieces, and then sent in the bloodstream to all the cells in your body. And so the glucose that's used by cells in your finger was in your stomach at one point, then it went to the small intestine. How did that glucose get from the small intestine to your finger? It got there using the bloodstream. So all your food has to be broken down into small enough pieces that it can go into the bloodstream so it can be spread throughout your entire body. This whole process happens in the small intestine. The mouth and the stomach get the process of digestion started, but the small intestine is where it really happens, where 90% of your digestion is going to go down. So the function of the small intestine is, in the small intestine, we are going to add massive amounts of enzymes. And these enzymes are going to break the food apart to where we're down to very, very, very simple molecules that can be absorbed in the blood. So this is where we're breaking carbohydrates down into glucose. This is where we're breaking lipids into fatty acids, and we're breaking down protein into amino acids. We're breaking down the food to its smallest possible form, or our monomers, and then at that point, once we've broken it down to a monomer, it's small enough that it can then be absorbed into the bloodstream. So in the small intestine, we break food apart into its smallest possible pieces, and then once it's that small, it can be moved into the bloodstream where it can be spread throughout the entire body. Now, why do I have this disgusting looking picture on right here? These are blood vessels right here. These are blood vessels. These are arteries that we got going on. Your small intestine is loaded with arteries, and these arteries, blood is moving through them and removing nutrients from the small intestine so it can go to the different parts of the body. So in the small intestine, we digest most of the food using enzymes, mainly chemical digestion going on here. And then we've got, we're going to take those nutrients out of the small intestine and send them to the whole rest of the body. Now, the small intestine has 3 parts to it. The 3 parts of the small intestine is, the first part is called the duodenum, or duodenum, depending on who you're talking to. In humans, this is a foot-long section of the small intestine. And this is where most of your digestion happens. The duodenum is where most of the digestion happens. Whole bunches of enzymes are added to the chyme in the duodenum so that we can break the food apart. After the duodenum, the next part was we got the jejunum, and then we got the ileum as the last part. And after food leaves the ileum, it then goes on to the large intestine where it can move on out. Now, a couple other things about the small intestine while we're right here is because this is where the majority of digestion happens, the easier the food is to digest, the smaller the small intestine can be. Carnivores have very short small intestines. Dogs have a small intestine that's only 9 feet. Omnivores have a medium length one. Our small intestine in humans is 23 feet long, and then herbivores have a really long one. Horses have a small intestine that is 70 feet long. And so this shows how the small intestine is involved in digestion. Carnivores eat meat, and meat is really easy to digest, and so they can get by with a really small intestine. Omnivores eat some plants, so they need a little bit longer one, and then herbivores eat the hardest food of all to digest, so they need a massive one, and that's why horses have a 70-foot long small intestine. After the food leaves the small intestine, the next stop is the large intestine. Now in humans, the large intestine is only 6 feet long, but the reason why it's called the large intestine is your small intestine is about the diameter of your pinky, your large intestine is about the size of a golf ball. So it's much wider is what we got going on there. Now the large intestine is not involved in digestion of food in any way, shape, or form. That once food leaves the small intestine, we have digested it as much as we possibly can. And so basically when the food leaves the small intestine, it's poop. And so everything that goes into the large intestine is going to be poop. But there's something else we got to do before we get rid of it. And the main function of the large intestine is this is where we're going to absorb water. So when you take a drink of water, that water goes down your esophagus, into your stomach, passes through all 23 feet of your small intestine, and then it isn't until the large intestine that your body can get access to that water by absorbing it. Now, how does this happen? Well, we're going to use osmosis is what's going to happen. In the large intestine, you have active transport of sodium, that we're constantly pumping sodium out of the food into our large intestine cells. That is going to lower the concentration of the water inside of these cells, and so water is going to want to leave the cell by osmosis, and that's how we reabsorb our water. Now, this is how it happens normally. It can get screwed up. If you absorb too much water out of the poop, the result is constipation, and we don't need to talk much more about that. Basically, your poop turns into bricks, and it hurts, okay? If you absorb too little water out of your poop, the result is diarrhea. If you want an idea of what the food looks like when it gets to the small intestine, it basically looks like diarrhea. Diarrhea is when you've absorbed absolutely no water out of the poop whatsoever. So we got to absorb just the right amount. Too much, we have constipation. Too little, we have diarrhea. Other major function of the large intestine, besides the absorption of water, is I told you that when food leaves the small intestine, we've digested it as much as we can, but there are certain things like cellulose that humans can't digest. That doesn't mean it's not food. Bacteria can make use of it. And so you literally have trillions of bacteria that live in your large intestine, and they're going to digest the food that you couldn't, like cellulose. And in the process, they're going to make vitamin K. Now, vitamin K is very important because it's important for the clotting of blood. If you don't make enough vitamin K, this is what happened. You bleed to death internally. This is an autopsy picture of a guy who died of an aneurysm because his blood couldn't clot because he was low in vitamin K. So that's an important thing that happens in the large intestine. And as mentioned, basically when the food gets to the large intestine, it's poop. It's feces, whatever you want to call it. So once it gets to the large intestine, the only thing left to do with it is get rid of it. All right, so now that we've talked about all the organs of your body that the food actually travels through, now it's time to start talking about the accessory structures of the digestive system. Now the accessory structures the food does not pass through, but each of these structures is going to make something that's going to aid in the digestive system. So the first one we're going to talk about is the salivary glands, okay? I'm not going to make you learn the 3 different types of them, but these are the glands that make your spit, okay? And so produces saliva, that's the nice fancy term for spit. And as mentioned, spit contains enzymes. And so spit is there to help you start breaking your food down. It also is going to kind of lubricate things so we can pass food through our digestive system. So that's the main function of saliva, and it is produced by the salivary glands, which are one of our accessory structures of the digestive system. Our next accessory structure is a little bit more important. It's the pancreas. The pancreas does about 23 jobs that keeps you alive. In this video, we're just going to talk about 3. There are 3 main functions of the pancreas as it relates to the process of digestion. The first thing it does is it's going to make insulin to regulate blood sugar. Insulin, of course, is the stuff that diabetics take. that if your blood sugar gets too high, insulin is going to bring it back down. And naturally, insulin is made in the pancreas. So anyone who's a diabetic, they have a problem with their pancreas. Their pancreas either isn't making enough insulin or it isn't making insulin at all. And so that's one of the things that the pancreas does. Other thing the pancreas does is makes lots and lots and lots of digestive enzymes. I talked about how in the small intestine we're going to dump lots of enzymes in the food that are going to break it apart. All those enzymes that are made, for the most part, are made in the pancreas. So the pancreas is going to make the enzymes that are going to break down your proteins, your carbohydrates, your lipids, and your nucleic acids so that we can use them to make new cells and so forth. So all these enzymes are going to be made in the pancreas. And then the final function of the pancreas that we need to talk about is the pancreas makes sodium bicarbonate, which is a base. Remember, I told you that the stomach makes acid, and this is a very, very powerful acid, hydrochloric acid that can dissolve steel. Well, when the food comes out of the stomach and it goes into the small intestine, it's got all that acid with it. And this acid will literally destroy your small intestine, just dissolve it completely. Well, the pancreas makes the sodium bicarb, which is a base, which is going to neutralize the acid and make it so your small intestine is not going to be destroyed. So those are the three main functions of the pancreas. Make insulin, make enzymes, and make sodium bicarbonate to aid in digestion. All right, the last of our accessory structures we're going to talk about in this video is we're going to talk about the liver. Now, we could spend the rest of the bloody class talking about the liver because the liver has over 400 jobs that it does to keep you alive. It's a multi-system organ that does lots of things to keep you alive. We're just going to talk about one main one as it has to do with digestion. The main function of the liver when it comes to digestion is to make this stuff that's called bile. Now, bile helps with the digestion of fats because here's the thing. Fats are hydrophobic. And so when they get in the small intestine, they don't want to move around. They want to kind of clump in the side and block off the small intestine. What bile does is bile has a hydrophilic side and it has a hydrophobic side. The hydrophobic side of the bile will bind to a lipid, okay, and it'll be attached to it. And so we're going to surround this lipid with this bile, which now on the outside has a complete hydrophilic side. So what this does is it makes it so the lipids can travel through water much easily. So that's one main function of the liver, is to produce bile, which helps with the digestion of fats. Now, bile is stored in is made in the liver, but it is stored in this thing that's called the gallbladder. So the liver makes it, and then after it makes it, it goes to the gallbladder, where after you eat a meal, the gallbladder can send a whole bunch of this bile stuff into the small intestine. Bile is added in the small intestine to help break the fats down. Here you can see a full stream of it coming in the small intestine. If you notice the color, if you've ever thrown up something that looks that color, you're really sick. It is possible to throw up so hard that you throw up bile. Been there, done that, no fun. If you ever do it, probably time to talk to a doctor because you're really in trouble at that point. Other thing we're going to talk about with the liver is involved in the storage of glucose. That when you break down sugars in the small intestine, some of those sugars are actually going to go to the liver where they're going to be stored, and then they're going to be slowly released. And so you store sugar in your liver so it can be slowly released into the bloodstream to maintain homeostasis because you got to have the proper amount of sugar in the blood or else you run out of energy and you're in trouble. So that's the main functions of the digestive system and the organs involved.